So many of your teaching sessions with QMEC will be in small groups. Certainly, those on campus will be, and in the earlier years, the only time really that you would have one-to-one teaching is in year five in stage three. So we thought it'd be helpful to think about what is a normal process for a group, especially if, as in stage two, you have a group for a whole year. And so actually, there are stages that a group will go through. So to begin with, they don't know each other often. They have, not met before. And so actually they're getting to get an idea of who they are, what their shared thoughts and beliefs are, what their ground rules are. It's really, really important in small groups to establish what ground rules are. Don't assume that everyone has the same ideas of what is expected, and actually your students might have expectations of you as well as vice versa. So I think that's a really important bit to encouraging safety within the group. There's often a bit of conflict or what's called storming when, especially if they have a task that they need to do together. Um, and so sometimes people might take over or not know who sorts out what and how this group sort themselves out. And so they might need a bit of guidance and facilitation from you. Hopefully, what happens next is usually that the group actually focuses on the activity and starts working together. They sort of, might say, well, listen, for this particular project, we'll be the nominated leaders, and then we can choose who wants to do what, and and have oversight, so they're all working towards a common goal. And if it's been a good group, usually at the end, when you're all coming together and closing, actually there's a period of sort of mourning and sadness. And I have a lovely story I was once told by one of our stage two tutors who, for her very, very first stage two group, um, about 6 months after they'd left, they all called her up and just said, "Could we come and have a coffee? Because we still really miss all being together and getting together." So a good group will certainly engender some of that emotion at the end. There's also challenges for teachers, especially when you are maybe new to teaching, or feeling a little bit nervous, or in a sort of group and not quite sure exactly, what to do. So there's some common sort of pitfalls. So rather than encouraging dialogue, we might feel like we have to know all the answers. So doing less of the facilitating and more of the lecturing, um, and therefore talking too much. I know we're very much, the DSR is the didactic Socratic ratio. So Layla and I, we promise you are very Socratic, and we'll ask you lots of questions when we see you face to face. But actually, there's times when, being didactic and just giving you information like we're doing here is probably the most efficient use of time. So that's what we're doing here, but that isn't what we will do in the small group. Um, we mentioned the growth mindset, and just thinking about, is that something you have with all your students? We can sometimes come filled with assumptions and biases, and sometimes, we might have a bias about or an assumption about a particular student, and we really need to support all our students to flourish. Um, sometimes we're sort of flying blind, so maybe we haven't prepared quite as much, and or we don't know the students or the material quite as well. And there's it's interesting. I always think it's important, if you found out about your students, and you've got a student who maybe is a psychologist or did a degree in pharmacology before and knows more about something than you, then actually I think you can use that to your benefit and to the group's benefit. So but for some people that might feel slightly challenging or threatening. So in groups, we just need to think what we're like as kind of individuals and teachers, and how we kind of maybe are aware of the things that we might fall into, some of the traps, and what we do about it. And so basically we wanted to just let you know that if you haven't got groups in your problems in your group, then something's wrong. This is sort of a normal process within a group, and it's one of the challenges, and actually is often quite enjoyable as a teacher, finding ways around it. What we don't want you to do is get stuck on your own with something. So if you have tried a few strategies, then and you're getting a bit stuck, then please come and see us. I remember one of our tutors speaking to me and saying, actually, there is one student who just takes over all the time. And as a group, we sort of talked about different strategies, what you might get that student to do, what their role might be, maybe as scribe, really going back to ground rules and, and just reminding people that it's really important to hear from everyone, to listen, to try and, be respectful of other people, give everyone else their chance, to do lots of breaking them up into small groups. And she sort of went away with all these suggestions that the group of teachers had come up with, and really sort of said to me, I just don't think it's going to work. And then got back to me the next week and said, oh my God, I tried this. I tried all of this and it worked. Actually, I can manage it with, just as a teacher, just using slightly different tools and setting it up. Actually, you can kind of often manage things. If it's something that maybe is a personal problem for the student, or two individuals, if it or a clash in personalities, then that might be a bit more difficult. And certainly please do ask us sooner rather than later. And sorry, go on, Layla. I'd forgotten I wasn't doing that one.
So one of the things about small groups, and now that we have the luxury of more face-to-face teaching again, is thinking about how you set up the room. Is that just that sort of physical change and setup can really have quite a big impact on the group and the group dynamics. So here are various different layouts, how you might have chairs and a table, with T being yourself, the teacher, and the rest being the students. So we'd encourage the sort of lilac setup or the pink setup, because this will really allow and encourage more of a facilitation than that sort of didactic teaching, where there's discussion going on within the group, and similarly, so using that sort of setup, this just shows the sort of lines of communication between the student and the facilitator. So this sort of setup will encourage more facilitation and more discussion, but as you can see, what you want is to have dialogue being opened up between the students, not just sort of one way between you and the individual students. And that will support that sort of more facilitatory role, rather than the didactic teaching, and it just generally adds to much more richness when you've got everybody involved in the discussion. And I found this particularly when with our clinical humanities workshops, which are quite small, and each pair was doing a different project, and if we sort of stuck to the first structure, there was almost silence within the rest of the group, and it was just a sort of one-way dialogue about that individual or that pair's project. However, once we started getting the others to sort of feedback, and this was actually done in the online environment, it was much more, the sort of dialogue that was going on was much more representative of the B lines of communication, which just makes it much more interesting and interactive for everyone.